Let me ask you a question. If, like me, you also believe that communication skills are one of the most important skills in business today, raise your hand and say yes.
Yes.
Thank you. If you believe that you'd be more effective in your personal and professional life if you could take your communication skills to the next level. If you think you'd be more effective then, raise your hand again. And say for sure. For sure. Thank you. You see, there is so much evidence coming out that is suggesting that what's separating the ultra performers, the high achievers, people who are excelling in their professional lives, who are taking companies forward, who are producing breakthrough results, it's not their intelligence. It's not their education. It's not their technical skill set, but it is their ability to communicate with clarity. As Kayla said, it's their ability to communicate with effectiveness. And it's their ability to communicate with impact. So today we're going to dive into a number of different elements of communicating with impact. But before that, I want to share with you how did I run into this idea of communicating with impact. Would you like to know? Would you like to know? Oh, come on.
Yeah.
All right. So I encountered this idea for the first time when I was only 9 years old. And I was in grade 5, and I was growing up in India, in a typical Indian family, a middle-class family. My parents had already decided that he's going to be an engineer, right? That's the joke about Indians. You do engineering first, and then you think about what you want to do with your life. So that was the plan for me. So grade 5, 9 years old, and my school was going to organize a public speaking contest. And being a 9-year-old, I didn't want to participate in a public speaking contest, right? So I went to my dad, Dad, I really don't want to participate in that. And my dad said, no, you have to. I said, no, Dad, I'm just going to call in sick. We went back and forth a few times, but then eventually, my dad said, you have to. Being able to speak in public is a critical skill. If you can communicate well in life, you'll do well. If you can communicate effectively, that'll help you for the rest of your life. If you can communicate with impact, you would live with impact. Ooh, interesting, right? Pretty deep. I probably didn't understand the depth of this message at that time. If you can communicate with impact, you can live with impact. When you think about it, isn't that true? Communication is the canvas that's binding everything on this planet. Isn't that right? Isn't that right, David?
That's right.
If communication wasn't there, we wouldn't be able to interact, and therefore, we wouldn't be able to create all these things that we have created. Yes or no? What's your name, sir?
Tolbert.
Tolbert.
Yeah.
Isn't that right?
That's right.
If we weren't able to communicate, we wouldn't be able to create all these amazing things that we've done. So therefore, if we can communicate with impact, we can live with impact. We can get people on our sides. We can communicate with clarity. We can get people to act on our message. And that perhaps is one of the most powerful skills that we can develop. So I stood up on that stage back when I was 9 years old. My granddad wrote my speech. That was the first speech I delivered in my life. My granddad is no more. But I forgot that speech. When I stood up, I blanked out. I got off stage. And obviously, I didn't win that contest. Now, 20-something years later, I still forget my speeches. And that's why I've stopped memorizing my speeches. Now I just talk. But that simple message had a profound impact on my life, and it's transformed my life in many different ways and transformed lives of people that I've been blessed to train and teach over the years. I've seen some of the amazing results that people have been able to produce in their professional lives when they started working on their communication. And today, you're gonna go down that path too, right? And maybe this is your first interaction with some formal training in communication, or maybe you've already received some training, right? But what I know for sure is that once you can start communicating with impact, your impact in life goes to a completely different level. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have a workshop. And what differentiates a workshop from a speech is that our goal is transformation. And finally, my invitation to you is to get uncomfortable, because that's when real learning happens. Think about a time when you grew professionally. That was perhaps a time when you challenged yourself, when you stepped outside of your comfort zone. Because if you stay where you are and you continue doing what you have always done, then you stay where you've always been. Therefore, get uncomfortable, step outside of your comfort zone, be open, be ready to explore, challenge your beliefs, challenge your opinions a little bit, and see what we can create together in these 2 hours. Are you ready to dive in?
Yes.
Are you ready to dive in? Come on, let's bring it up a little bit.
Yes.
All right, thank you. So what is transformation? Transformation is focused information plus conscious effort plus practice, right? So we're going to provide you with information, you're going to put in some effort, and we'll have practice. But for us to create focused information, one of those things that I want to do right now in 2 minutes is, I want to ask you, what is it that would make this program a success for you? Now obviously we have a plan, but we also have some flexibility on that plan. So we can improvise. Because I want to make sure that everybody who's here gets exactly what they need. And that's what focused information means. Right? So I want to write down at least 3 to 5 expectations that you might have for this program. So what would make this a success for you? Let's start with you, Talbot, because I know your name.
Yeah. Basically, tips on how to improve communication.
Okay. Well, great. What else? Something more specific, because obviously you'll get this, right? Improving what? Fluency in? Fluency in speaking. So how to speak like, how to sound crisp, right? Great. What's that?
Defending a position.
Defending a position. So can I say how to influence somebody, right? Because you want to get them on your side, right? What else? Let's get something from the back too. Yeah, please. Okay, what else? Yes, sir.
Building trust.
Building trust. Communication is getting your message across, and successful or effective communication is getting your message across in a way that it achieves its intended goal. Isn't that right? That's essentially what communication is, right? So that's what we're trying to achieve. And while we try to do that, brevity is strength and clarity is power. So every time we communicate for 4 reasons. And I'm going to start you off with 1, and let's see if we can come up with the other 3. The first one is we communicate to inform. So that's providing status updates, just giving information on something, right? What else do we communicate for?
Persuade.
Persuade, that's great. So that's communicating to seek approvals, communicating to sell, communicating to get somebody to act on your suggestion, right? What you said? Defending your idea, getting people on board with you, that's communicating to persuade. We communicate to inspire, so we get people excited, engaged. And finally, we communicate to build goodwill. And building goodwill is small talks, all these conversations that you have in the hallway, right? Building relationships. So depending on what you're communicating for, effective communication is about achieving the goal of communication, right? If it was to inform, making sure that people feel 100% informed about what you said. They're clear on it. If it is communicating to persuade, it is about getting people to act on your idea, right? If it is to communicate to inspire, it is to get people to get inspired. And if it is communicating to build goodwill, then obviously that is the easier one. But why is brevity so important these days? Brevity or conciseness is more important than it has ever been in the history of human race.
Short attention span.
Short attention span, right? So human attention span is one of the most highly tracked metrics in human behavior. And this single metric informs thousands of decisions in the world, in business, in marketing, in sales, ad creation. People look up this metric and they decide on how they want to communicate with human beings. The first time this metric was actually tracked was in 1932. And the number they found was 5.2 minutes. And the last time this metric was tracked was in 2013. Can you guess what number they found? What number they came up with? What's that? 30 seconds. What else?
8 seconds.
8 seconds. The actual number is 7 seconds. 7 seconds. Now, what does that mean? And there are multiple critiques on that number, but we all would agree that our attention span has significantly reduced. Yes or no? Right? 7 seconds means an average human being gets distracted every 7 seconds. So what type of distraction is that? It's just random thoughts. Should I check my cell phone right now? What am I eating for dinner tonight? Why is this guy wearing a red shirt? Is this guy Indian? What's he put on his hair? What's going up on the ceiling? How many people are here? How much money did they make? What's going up on the screen? All that stuff, right? Just random thoughts that just fly by our head. And we can't control them. And why is this number decreasing? It's decreasing because we are now, our brain is not trained to focus. We're always distracted. We always have emails popping up, text messages popping up. We have Facebook, we have WhatsApp, we have all these things. Then we have Donald Trump, right? All these things are going on, and that's reducing our attention span. So therefore, brevity is strength. The more concise we can be, more likely we are to get our message across. The longer it takes, the less likely we are to get our message across or to achieve the goal of our communication. So one of the primary mistakes that most communicators make in life is they think everybody thinks and acts the same way. They think everybody processes information the same way. And that is obviously far from the truth. Everybody looks similar. Everybody's got two eyes. Everybody looks similar, but we all process information differently. 2 sheets and pass the rest. And this assessment that we're going to do is going to help us identify how you communicate, right? So that you can understand how different human beings can be. And this is an adapted assessment from what is a researcher named Kolb, who actually, this is the most respected assessment in communication and leadership. Answer these 9 questions, the one that say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. We're going to answer those 9 questions, and we're going to put a rank horizontally. So horizontally looking on column 1, 2, 3, 4, on every horizontal row, you would have 1, 2, 3, or 4. And this is answering how you like to receive information. Now what we're going to do is, we're going to actually stand up and move around. So we're going to assume that this room turns into that graph. So if you are quadrant 2 heavy, you go on that side. Quadrant 1 goes here. Quadrant 4 and 3 go on these sides. So I want you to look at the words that are describing your quadrant and see if you align with any of those words. Do you align with these words? Yeah? What about quadrant 2? Do you align with the words in your quadrant? More so than other quadrants? What about you? Quadrant, this is 3, right? So what has been found is these quadrants overlay very well with this, if you look at the screen. So quadrant 1 is the big picture thinkers. So these people are excited and fueled by creativity, with intuition. When things are too clear, when things are too well defined, when somebody asks you, what is the logic, what is the step-by-step process, that's not their style. They are fueled by the vision, the big picture thinking. Is that right? And when you communicate with these people and you ask them on the numbers, what are the numbers, tell me the logic, tell me the evidence, it creates a bit of a disconnect. Yes, they have elements of the other 3 as well, obviously. Everybody has elements of all 4. All of you have elements of all 4, but everybody has a certain leading learning style, certain leading working style. Well, let's go to quadrant 2. Now, quadrant 2 are heavier on the people side. These people seek personal meaning. They want to build connections. They want to see what is the impact of the work that they are doing. And when you miss out on those, when you talk only business with these people, then there is a disconnect. See these people, communicating with them, and if they don't understand that these people are people-driven, then there's a disconnect. And then they don't enjoy working together. That's why we hear terms like, I work really well with that guy. What does that essentially mean? That essentially means that they fall in the same quadrant. That's all that means. Now let's go to quadrant 3. These people are the plan-driven. Now they want to have a step-by-step plan. And I worked with Matthew in organizing this event up. I can testify that, right? He wants a step-by-step plan. He wants to know everything that's going to happen next week, next day, next hour. Is that right, Matthew? And when you don't provide that to these people, there's a disconnect again, right? Similarly, for these people, these are purpose-driven. How will it work? What is the evidence? What's the logic behind this? What is the engineering? All that stuff. Is that right? Now, when you don't provide that to those people, that is a disconnect again. So what's the takeaway? What do we want to do? Every time we communicate, we want to have all our 4 Ps of communication in our message. Yes, it's not easy all of the time, but when you have important messages, for example, you're delivering a presentation, you're introducing a project, you're sending out a proposal, every time you want to connect with most people in the room, you want to include all of these things. What is the big picture? What's the high-level vision? Why are we actually doing this? What is it going to create? They want to see the visual image. People-driven, they want to seek personal meaning. They want to connect with you first before you actually get into business. These people want a step-by-step process. They want a step-by-step plan. How is it going to happen? What's going to happen? And finally, those people want to see the numbers, the logic, the engineering, the design, all of that behind. Right? Now, what do you struggle with the most? Often, most of the time, you would struggle with communicating with people who are the exact opposite. 2 would have a hard time communicating with 4. Right? So that is where you have the most difficulty. But each and every one of us can balance this quadrant, all of these quadrants out by training ourselves to follow the 4 Ps in every message that we send out. So in one-on-one business conversations, we're going to cover these 4 things. The first one is bullet point speaking, being polite and assertive, listening, and finally body language as it aligns with one-on-one business conversations. Now let me ask you a question. What is easier to read and process? A page that's full of thick text, or a page that's actually broken into paragraphs? Paragraphs or bullet points? Bullet points. Bullet points are bullet points with bolded headings. Bolded headings, right? The same concept applies in our one-on-one conversations, in verbal conversations. There are people who speak in big, thick pages of text, and there are people who speak in bullet points. What's your name? Rochelle. Now, if I ask Rochelle, what do you do? And what's your job title?
Mechanical engineering training for
Okay,
Ontario
EIT. Oh, I see. Okay, mechanical EIT. So she's a mechanical engineer. And if I ask, Rochelle, what do you do? Now, the big, thick page of text version of that response might sound like, I'm a mechanical engineer in training, and I'm working with the engineering department, helping them out with designs, and it's really fun. We've got a good team out there, and my boss is really good. I'm really lucky to work with him, and I was recently working on a design project out in Ottawa, so it was really fun. Now, I exaggerated it a little bit, but is it not similar to a response that we typically receive? Now, what is the bullet point version of that response? I'm a mechanical engineer in training, and currently I'm working on 3 main things. I'm working on design projects, I'm working on some internal quality improvement project, and I'm doing some internal social committee work for my company. Now, which one out of these 2 was easier to process? The second one. Which one do you remember more of? Which one? Do you remember anything out of that? Probably less than 20%, right? Here, you probably remember more than 80%, even though this one was 60 seconds ago, right? And that is what happens when we speak in big, thick pages of text. People hear us, but they can't process the information that we give out. It's not their fault, it's not your fault, it's just how the brain processes information. It has been found that when we deliver information like that, people don't remember more than 10% the next day, which is crazy, right? You put in so much effort, you're trying to give them everything you got, and now they don't remember anything. If they don't remember it, then they're less likely to act on it, right? And when they don't act on it, then we get frustrated. My team doesn't get me, right? All those things start to happen. So the question is, how do we speak in bullet points? And essentially, you have to do 3 things to be able to speak in bullet points. And this is what is going to help you articulate your thoughts better, right? This is how you'd be able to speak more crisply, because you would have a finite number of things you want to say. We fumble when we don't have a structure in mind. Yes or no? When we don't know what to say, then we fumble. Then we have the ahs and the ums because you're thinking while you are speaking. But if you can train your mind to build some structure in your thoughts, then you would have lesser ahs and ums. And then over time, you would be able to completely eliminate the ahs and ums. So what do you need? The first is structure. Obviously, you've got to have a certain number of points, right? And it seems like a very difficult thing to do, but it's actually very easy. I've trained many people, and I've seen them completely program their way of thinking to speak in bullet points. So when somebody asks you a question, so what do you think we should do next on this project? Right? That is a typical question you might answer at work. And these are also pretty high-stake questions. If you respond well to this kind of a question, let's say with your boss, then you start to be treated differently, because now they think, okay, this guy actually knows what he's talking about, or what she's talking about, right? But if you fumble and go all over the place, then obviously the brand and the reputation that you build is aligned with that. So you want to first start off with thinking about what is it that we can actually do in this project. If you are challenged, you can even say, give me a couple seconds to structure my thoughts. If you can't come up with a number right away, just say, we have a number of different paths we can pursue. First, we could actually go into some more data analysis. We could understand what is the energy consumption looking like and all that. Or second, we could go into design components. So we could start the design, and then we can do the data analysis later on. Or finally, we could even go into some competitor research. Now, I had 3 points, but I didn't know if I'm going to have 3 points. So what I said initially was, there are a number of different options we can pursue, right? That alone is enough for people to process your information easily. Do you remember the 3 points that I just said to a certain extent? Yes? Just because they didn't even make sense, right? But just because I said them in a certain number, you remember them. But if I would go off in a big, thick page of text, it'll be difficult. You won't be able to process it. So the highlights would stick out, but that's it. Second is pauses. So pauses are what make bullet points, right? If you don't pause, then there are no bullet points. For example, we have a number of different options. Either we could go into data analysis and we could understand what's going on, or we could go into actually engineering design, Now it becomes a big, thick page of text. But when I pause, either we could go into data analysis and we could see what is going on. Or we could go into, now do you see that? Do you feel it? It feels different, and people love it. Why? It gives them time to process the information, because they're probably listening to it for the first time. Again, this is something you can train your mind to do. Nobody was born learned how to pause. We all learned and trained ourselves to pause effectively. Finally, the third is gestures. This is easier. For most people already do it. 1, 2, 3. We could do data analysis, we could do engineering design, or we could do competitor research. Or we could do data analysis, engineering design, or competitor research. Feels different, right? Because there is another layer of visual information that's coming at you. So it adds more color to the message. Being polite yet assertive. So one of those things that I found while I was working as an engineer, and I worked now that I run my consulting practice, this is one of those things that most of us struggle with. How can we be polite yet assertive? How can we communicate our point more effectively, right? And we're going to go into some more deeper psychological triggers and influence in a little bit, but this is, we're going to go into 2 templates that you can use to be more polite but assertive at the same time, especially when you have an idea and you don't know how to actually communicate it out, because somebody else has another idea, right? And you don't want to go head on against them, because that leads into a conflict, right? Yes or no? Yes. Great, thank you. So how do you actually be polite and assertive? The first template is understand and invite. Very simple. How this works is you start off with saying, I understand what you mean. So what's your name, sir? Adam. So if Adam and I are working on a project, and Adam says, we got to pursue path X, and I say, we got to pursue path Y. So I would start off, and I know that path Y is the better path, right? So I would say, Adam, I understand what you mean. You're suggesting that we go with path X because this is the path you have always pursued in the past, and this has worked decently well for you, and you want us to do this first, this first, this first, and this at the end, so that we can deliver the project on time to the client. Is that right? And I would say yes. Now what did I do? I first took the issue off that I don't understand him off the table. At the same time, I was sensitive to his ego, his needs, his opinion. So I respected him. Then I would say, and here is what I invite you to consider. Based on my experience of working on these projects in the past, the project we are working on is different than the projects we have worked on in the past. And therefore, for this, and this reason, we got to pursue path Y because this is going to help us with these results, and we're going to be able to do our work faster and better. Now, obviously, the logic has to be there, right? Otherwise, he'll push back again. But what this does is it opens people up to listen to your opinion, right? Otherwise, there are a lot of egos that come in play. There are conflicts. People don't want to let go of their idea because they feel they'll lose out. Have you seen that happen? Right? And this template gets you to bypass that. The second template is lessons learned approach. And this one is even more powerful. Every single time I've used this, this has gotten people on board. Very similar to understand and invite, but this time you're actually providing evidence. Based on the lessons that I've learned by working on similar projects in the past, by working on 27 different projects with 13 different clients in the past, I've found that when we pursue this path, it delivers 27% higher results. And this is almost foolproof. Obviously, if your idea has logic, right? It's not going to allow you to sell crap. But when your idea has logic, this allows you to be polite and assertive at the same time. So these are the two templates. Now let's move forward. Listening. How do you listen effectively? Right? And obviously, listening and hearing, these are two different things. Hearing is paying attention, and obviously that is something you have to do on your own. There is no rocket science about it. You've got to pay attention, not look at your phone and do other things, right? But listening is how to actually process the information the right way. So the first technique in listening is paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is perhaps the most widely understood and practiced technique in listening. What is paraphrasing? Restating the words of the speaker back to them. That's it. So if I'm talking to Adam about a new project that he wants me to work on, I'd ask him all those questions about the project, and then I would say, okay, Adam, so what I'm hearing is you want us to work on this project so that we can improve customer satisfaction scores in this area. Is that right? Okay, good. So what this does is it brings us on the same page, right? You want me to do this, this, and this. Is that right? Yes. It brings us on the same page. Now we're clear. Now we can move forward in the conversation. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. Use body language to convey attention. So nod, take notes, obviously, if that's applicable and if you're not on the phone and things of that nature, right? Silence shows confidence. Many people can't listen very well because they think they got to contribute when they don't have anything to say. So raise your hand if you know someone who talks for the sake of talking. Do you think very highly about that person? Probably not, right? So we don't want to be that person. But sometimes we all get tempted into that trap of being that person, including me, right? All of us. Why do we do that? We think we have to. We see other people talk and we think, I should also add something in here. Yes or no? Right? So it's okay to be silent at times. Be silent when you're unsure of what to say, don't have anything meaningful to say, people are not ready for your words, they're not asking you for your advice, don't offer free advice. Use the TMM technique to actually escape that. So TMM is tell me more. When you don't know what to say, just ask them another question. Hey, can you elaborate on that a little more? And that gives you another few minutes, right? And people love it. Finally, body language in one-on-one business conversations. So what is home position? Have you heard of the concept of home position? So home position is the position that you go back to when you're not using your arms or your body to make any gestures. So what are some common home positions? Hands clasped, crossed, right? A good home position is an open home position. So where your chest is open. That helps you connect with people, and that is how you build trust. Because if something is blocking in between you and the other person, then they don't know it, but science tells us that they can't connect with you and can't trust you. Politicians and leaders that wear deep-cut jackets are trusted more by people, are more likely to get voted for. Doesn't make sense, but that's how our brain works, right? So home position should be open. Now, sometimes we have a hard time having an open home position because that same thing applies to presentations as well. So when I started speaking, I used to talk like this, and you would notice many people talk like this. So when I started trying to keep my arms down, I felt like I was naked. I was like, oh my God, it's all open, right? Because we're not used to it. So it's going to feel, maybe it might feel like that to you as well. But over time, you can get used to it, and then people can trust you more, they can connect with you more. Eye contact, what is the right eye contact for one-on-one business conversations? Make it for 3 seconds, break it for 1 to 2. So make it for 3 seconds, and then break it for a little bit, and then come back. Beyond 3 feels awkward, right? Pacifiers. What are pacifiers? So if you're a new parent, it means something else to you. But what does it mean in the science of body language? Things that we do to calm ourselves down. So what are some examples of that? Playing with the ring, biting nails, peeling off the skin off the fingers, touching your head. While they're presenting, they do this. What is this? This is a pacifier. Some people play with the slide remote. I used to do this a lot, so now I know it, now I keep it down, right? So everybody has certain pacifiers that they engage in while they're talking. Some people bite the pen, like many different things. Now what you have to do is you have to identify your pacifiers so that you can slowly start to eliminate them. And then there are no pacifiers. Because you want to come across as polished and clean and clear, right? Or do you want to come across as somebody who's biting nails or playing with a pen or biting a pen? No. Yes or no? You don't want to do that, right? So identify your pacifiers and then slowly start to eliminate them, because once you identify them, it's easy to eliminate them, because now your brain is programmed to notice it. You would notice it, that every time I play with this, my brain notices it. And then I'm like, okay, I'm playing with it again. Let's put it down. That's it. And slowly over time, you eliminate it forever. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an exercise. You've got to find a partner. So quickly find a partner, and then I'll give you more instruction. So out of your partner, between your partner and you, identify who looks more like me out of the two of you. Done? So if you look more like me, raise your hand. Let me see. Let me see who looks like me. Who looks more like me in between you and your partner? Okay. So if your hand is up right now, you are good looking. The other person, you are hot stuff. So just remember your name for the rest of our exercise. And what you have to do is you have to have a casual conversation that you might have at work. So you can talk about a project, what do you do, what are you working on, things of that nature, right? Nothing super strict, just have a casual conversation. One person is going to be on the asking side, and one person is going to be on the answering side in lap 1, right? So while you're asking, what you have to do is you have to track if they're doing bullet point speaking, if they are not using pacifiers. If they use pacifiers, keep it in your mind and let them know afterwards, right? And if they're using open body language, making eye contact, all of those things that we just covered. If the conversation goes that way, then they might have to use polite and assertive. So that'll be one side. And then you switch roles and do it the other way around. Now before you get into this, I have one final invitation, that it's going to feel fake. When you do bullet point speaking for the first time, it feels fake because that's not your natural way of speaking, right? And let it feel fake. Maybe gestures would feel fake to you, but that's how everything new starts. The first time you sat in the car, there were too many things to manage and you weren't sure what's going to happen. And it's the same way. That's how bullet point speaking is going to come into you. This minor tweak can completely transform the effectiveness of your business conversations, right? So this brings us to the end of one-on-one business conversations. And now we're going to get into expanding your influence. And this will have three main components. First is obviously understanding influence. Then we'll get into some basics of influence. And then finally, deep psychological triggers in influence. Now, influence is a very tricky topic because you're trying to get somebody else to agree with you, right? Many people that are not exposed to science of influence and how you influence other people, they think it's manipulation. And maybe it is, maybe it is not. But the truth is that the most powerful, the most effective, the most successful people on the planet are going deep into these skills. So what is influence? Influence is getting people on board with you, right? That's it. Getting people to agree with what you're saying, whether that is going to a specific restaurant, whether that is to invest in a certain project, whether that is to invest in Bitcoin. That's what it is, right? Getting people to agree with you. And it's probably the most powerful skill in the world. Think about it. Everything that has taken the world forward could do it because of the leader's ability to get people on board. Yes or no? Right? If the leader of that movement, that company, whatever that is, didn't have the ability to influence people, then that thing wouldn't happen, right? So it's probably the most powerful skill on the planet, if you think about it that way. Now let's go into some of the basics of influence. So what is the house of influence? The house of influence says that how does influence work? And on the foundation you have ethics, because you've got to be ethical human being. Otherwise, you can't trick people for the longer term. If you're ethical, then you'd be influential in the longer run. If you're wishy-washy on your ethics, then you'll eventually be done, right? The two pillars are communication skills and relationships. Obviously, if you can't get your message across well, how would you influence somebody else, right? If they don't understand what you said, just like a big, thick page of text, then how would you act on it? And similarly, relationships. If they don't like you, they're less likely to act on your ideas. Make sense? Finally, at the top, it's best practices that we'll get into, right? So basics of influence and persuasion. And these are the 6 basic triggers that were initially identified by a researcher named Robert Cialdini. And he published them in multiple books. So it's not my own content, but we'll go through this quickly. What are the 6 basic triggers in influence and persuasion? The first one is reciprocity. And this is essentially saying when you help somebody, they are highly likely to help you back, right? If you have agreed with somebody in the past, they're likely to agree with you, right? Reciprocity. Second is liking. If they like you, they're likely to agree with you. Third is scarcity. Now this one is slightly deeper than the first 2. Scarcity means we are more likely to do things, say yes to things, when there's less of them. When we think it's difficult for us to get those things. We are more likely to get those. And we are less likely to do things which are more easily available. Put this in a dating context. Who are you more likely to want to be with more? The guy or the girl who texts you 20 times a day, or the guy or the girl who seems to be hard to get? Just because they're hard to get makes you more likely to want to be with them. Yes or no? Right? These are laws. So there's a law of scarcity which has proven this, right? So it's not been made up. These are actually proven laws. And yes, they might work less or more on some people, but universally, they're accepted as laws. Authority. When you're perceived as an authority in a certain field, people agree with you. For example, if you're a doctor, if you have published certain books, and now if you say something, people would more likely to be agreeing with you and getting on board. Make sense? Consistency. People want to stay consistent with their promises. So if they have made a certain promise in the past, they would try to stick to that promise. For example, in the research that Robert did for this, they found that people would not show up for appointments in a medical clinic, right? So only when the people that were booking the appointments were asked that, are you sure you would show up? And they said, yes, I will. That increased the show up rates by 18%, just because they made a promise. Simple, right? Consensus, we're likely to do things which we see other people do, right? When you see a lineup in a store, we think it's a good store, right? So that influences our behavior. So a lot of these things you probably have heard of. You just put a label on it now, right? Reciprocity, liking. We already knew those things. Scarcity, authority, you can build those things. Scarcity is not being desperate in your suggestion. When you want somebody to do something, the more desperate you sound, the less likely they are to do it. That's what the law of scarcity says, right? Now let's get into some of the deep psychological triggers. Now these are deep, and you might not have heard of most of them in the past. You might have heard of some, but it's very likely that somebody would have heard of all of them. So people say yes. According to human psychology, people say yes for two reasons. Only two reasons can get anybody to say yes. So every time you have said yes to anything in the world, it's for one of two reasons. The first one is called, and don't stress too much on the word choice, it's coming from psychology, it sometimes sounds a little too mean. Greed. So we want more of something. For example, Adam, if you invest in this project, we can improve our revenues by 20%. That's trying to appeal to his greed. Rochelle, if you go back to school and pursue an MBA, you can make 30% more money, 40% more money. That's trying to appeal to her greed to get her to say yes to go back to school and get an MBA. Make sense? What do you think is the other one?
Goodwill.
Goodwill. That's not it, but I can see where that is coming from. Typically, goodwill is essentially contributing to one of those. For example, if I say, Sergio, would you help me move my place? I'm going to a different apartment. And he says yes, right? So he seems like he said this because of goodwill, but essentially he said this because of greed of better relationships, better friendships. He wants people to be around him. So he thinks when I help him out, he'll be a good friend, will enhance our friendship, and that'll eventually help me out living my life. Make sense? Right? So essentially it comes down to one of these two. The other one is fear. And fear is, what would you lose when you don't do it? Adam, if we don't invest in this project, we'll dilute our brand, this other company would take us over, and we might be out of business. Rochelle, you know what? We're having the second longest bull run in the history of human race. The longest bull run in the history of human race was 12 years. Now it's been 11 years. The last time we had an economic crash was 2008. 11 years, it's been all flat or upswing. So an economic crash is around the corner. It's not about if, it's about when. And when it does, people are going to lose jobs, there's going to be a lot of chaos, a lot of mess. But if you go back to school and get an MBA, you'd be so much more in demand, you'd have a job, you'd be able to maintain your lifestyle, you'd be able to take care of your family just by getting an MBA. Now, which one out of the two pitches? The first one was, if you go back to school, you'll make 30% more money. Which one of the two, if one of them is ever going to, is more likely to get it to say yes to an MBA? The second one, right? Yes or no? Right? So research has proven this one is up to 10 times more powerful than greed. But what do we naturally always try to pitch? We always try to pitch based on greed, not on fear, right? Because that's how we think. We think we are horses, we're going to run behind money, but that doesn't work. But fear is so much more powerful. And you can also have both. It's not that it's either or, it can be both. Rochelle, you would make 30% more money, but you would also hold on to your job while people are losing jobs. Right? Does that make sense? Yes or no? So when you're asking somebody to say yes to you, ask yourself, what is your message rooted in? Is it rooted in greed, or is it rooted in fear, or is it rooted in both? 95% of the messages that I see around me are rooted in greed. But now that you know about it, you'd be able to identify the 5%. Politicians use it very well. Some good companies use it very well. Good leaders use it very well because they know it. Sounds good? Clear? So next time you want to get somebody on board, instead of saying what they're going to get, tell them what are we going to lose if we don't do it. Yes programming. So yes programming is a technique from sales which says that when people start saying yes to something, they're more likely to say yes to the next thing. For example, if I want to say, sir, what's your name? Drake? Jake. J-A-K-E? Jake. So if I want Jake is, let's say Jake is operations manager of a factory. And if I want Jake to actually run an improvement initiative on his factory floor, I would say, Jake, I think we should run an improvement initiative on your factory floor. We can improve things, da-da-da. But most likely, Jake is going to say no. Every time there's improvement initiatives, people push back. But if I start off with yes programming, I say, Jake, we have done some great work in the past and we have produced some great results. But would you agree there is always opportunity for improvement? What is he going to say? Yes. Now he said yes to me once. Now he's more likely to say yes to the next thing. He's more likely to say yes to the next thing, right? So this is called yes programming. You ask them a rhetorical question that is very difficult for somebody to say no to. So it was very difficult for him to say no. No, there is no opportunity for growth. Obviously, he would not say no to that, right? Are we here to do some great work? Everybody's going to say yes, right? So there you got them into the yes program, which means try to get somebody to say a smaller yes before you want them to say a bigger yes. Well-structured message is more likely to get people on board. So what is the right structure? Every message has 3 components. What are the 3 components? Why, what, and how. These 3 things are always there. Sometimes we might miss out on one of those, but what does the why mean? Why means why should we actually do it? Why should we run an improvement initiative? What is about what to run, right? So improvement initiative. How will it actually happen? We'll bring consultants in, we'll bring those things, it's going to take 6 months. So how is the more of the mechanics of what we want to do? Make sense? Most people have the tendency to get right into the what. They would say, let's run an improvement initiative. And then they get pushed back. I want you to invest in Bitcoin. And they get pushed back. I want you to invest, let's do this project. They get pushed back. Why? Because they didn't talk about why we need to do it. We need to do it because of these, and these reasons, right? So when we communicate in this manner, which was brought up by Simon Sinek. Have you seen his TED Talk? Simon Sinek's TED Talk? A few people. That's one of the most highly watched TED Talks of all time. So watch it. It's pretty cool. And this is what he brought up in one of his concepts he called golden circle, which essentially means you got to start with the why and then go into the what and then finally the how. And typically, the ratio that you want to use is for an influencing conversation is 60% you want to spend on the what, the why, 30% on the what, and 10% on the how. If you don't spend enough time on the what and getting them engaged in why we need to do this, for example, what would that conversation look like between me and Jake? It'll be, Jake, would you agree our defect rate has gone really high? He'll say, yeah, it's going really high. And we've been looking into some alternatives. So I'm just talking about the why, what's broken, what we need to improve, why are we actually doing it, right? So a lot of our conversation needs to spend time spent on the why, which makes sense, right? Because that is the main reason we're going to do it. Sounds good? Okay. Subtle assumption of yes. This is very subtle, as it sounds like. Assuming the yes. What that means is, hey, we talked about the project. What do you suggest are the next steps? As opposed to, hey, would you agree? Do you agree? Now that sounds like a big question to some people. They're like, I need to think about this. Does that happen? Right? If you ask them for a clear-cut answer. So what you do is you just ask them, what are the next steps? What do you suggest we do next? And if they are in agreement, if they're on the borderline, that typically pushes them over. Mirroring. Now, mirroring is one of the first few techniques invented in human psychology. And mirroring is based on the idea that human beings like people. People like people who are like what? Who are like themselves, right? So we're more likely to get attracted to people who are like us. And that is what mirroring is based on. And we already mirror people anyways. For example, if Jake wanted to become friends with the CEO of his company, or he wanted to become friends with a 5-year-old, what are the things he would change in his communication? Would he change the tone of his voice? Would he change the language he uses? Would he change his body language? He probably change the topics of what he's going to talk about. He's going to talk about games and other things with the kid. And when he talks to the CEO, he's going to change all of those things to align more with the CEO. He's going to talk about topics that he knows the CEO is interested in. Yes or no? We all do that. That's called mirroring. You're trying to mirror the CEO so that you can build a connection with him. You're trying to mirror the kid to build a connection with them. And what mirroring is, being a slightly more strategic and conscious about it. So if I'm meeting somebody and that person talks like slowly and they're soft spoken, and I'm all excited and I'm talking loud and I'm having big arm gestures, is that likely to build connection in between us? Yes or no? No, right? So that is what mirroring is. When you see somebody is far apart, you want to start to mirror them a little bit. So when they are speaking softly, make a conscious effort to speak slightly softly so that they feel connected with you. They feel comfortable around you. Isn't that a good thing to do? Makes them comfortable, right?
I think that's something you have to be very sensitive to. Because if it's not done from a good place, people may feel that you're mocking.
Obviously. And you don't want to do it to that extreme, right? You don't want to start copying them. Mirroring them means you want to come closer to them. So if somebody is sitting right up on the chair and I'm relaxed back and doing that, that is not going to build connection. So I would, sit up a little bit just so that we feel like we're similar. And that creates rapport, and therefore, now they like you more, and they're more likely to be with you where you are. Suggestive body language, and this is the final one that we're going to cover. Suggestive body language was brought up by a researcher, and it's called the Sullivan's nod. And what does that mean? And this makes very interesting, but very powerfully, proven to be very powerful. What that means is, if I want Adam to agree with me to invest in a certain project, I'd say, Adam, I think we should really invest in that project. So what I'm doing is I'm gently nodding. And that suggests them to say yes. Makes no sense. But that's how brains work. So in research, they actually did this research in restaurants and many other places. And in the restaurants, what they found was they wanted to increase the orders on appetizers and desserts so that they can increase the billing per person. So when servers would say that, okay, so what would you like to have for dessert? Would you like to try some of our new ice cream? And the dessert orders increased by 65%. Can you believe it? He likes that, and he's already nodding. So, very interesting. Again, suggestive body language. Now, this was the last one. So we've covered a lot of different things. Again, not everything is going to align with you. That's okay, right? If you can take away 1 or 2 or 3, that's amazing, right? So see what aligns with you. These are obviously proven strategies, proven practices that have delivered results that are proven through science, through research, right? I use not everything, but I use most of these things on and off depending on what's going on, right? But obviously how you bring it together, that's your style. That's obviously your own personal judgment. You don't want to be looking fake. You don't want to be looking manipulative, all of those things. But you want to make it natural. And you want to do it with the right ethics in mind. Because if you don't, people are going to catch you. And that is not good, right? That's not what we are here for. We are here for using the right science to take the right projects and ideas forward. So these psychological triggers, they work because they're proven. Obviously, that's why we're discussing them. And these can single-handedly transform the effectiveness of whatever you work on. If you're working on projects, your teams would be aligned on you. If you're working in sales, you'd be able to persuade people to act on your suggestions. If you're just a team player, it'll help you build more powerful relationships, because essentially, if you see, it's all rooted in rapport, right? You're trying to build rapport first. What is a yes? Yes is a rapport. When we agree on something, we say yes. So that builds rapport. People like that. That's the basis of connection. So typically, yes programming you want to use only in the beginning, not halfway in the conversation, right? If you use it halfway, then it'll break. If it's going well and you start using yes programming, they're going to be like, where is it coming from? Why is he asking me all these questions, right? So you have to see where it's working. That's just one of the tools. So it's always tools, not rules, right? These are all tools in your toolkit. And you have to make your judgment on what to be used when. Okay, so let's move forward. And what we're going to get into now is building and communicating your personal brand. Personal brand is essentially what people think about you. That is your brand. Collective perceptions of people about you. And we often think we don't have a brand, but essentially everybody has a brand. Whether or not you're strategic about it, you have a brand. What could be your brand? Highly professional, very passionate, never on time, great communicator, right? These are all some examples of brands. Now, we are all running a business. Every single person in this room is running a business. And what do you sell? You sell your time. You sell your time to an employer. You sell 2,000 hours per year. You're not employees. You're all what I call employeepreneurs. You're selling your time, and it's your decision on who you want to sell your time to. And the better reputation you have, the better brand you have, the more in demand you're going to be. Brand is to you, your brand is to you as location is to what? Is as location is to real estate, right? Without a brand and without a location, real estate is worthless, right? So let's get into what encapsulates a brand and how can we bring all of these things that we learned to essentially build a more powerful brand, because that's the goal, right? We don't want to learn communication for the sake of learning communication. We want to learn communication skills and impact and influence so that we can do better things. Yes or no? Communication is a skill that's going to help us accomplish something else, right? That's a strategy. That's just one of the tools we're going to use. So let's get into what are the components of your own personal brand, right? And while we get into that, I want you to understand that there are three components of a personal brand. And this is basically your professional image at work, professional selfie in work. What are the three components? The first one is your why. The second is your USP. And second and third can essentially overlap, which is your strengths. So keep this one page and pass the rest. And what we're going to cover is a personal brand creation template. So your why, USP, let's say, or your strengths, right? So what encapsulates your why? Now, why has two options. USP and strengths, they are easy, right? You want to look at your soft skills and your hard skills. And I'll give you 2 minutes, and then I'll coach one of you live right now. So that will help you see how we want to communicate your personal brand. Now, why has two options. So it's not both. You have to select one. One is your personal why. Why do you do what you do? So this is the overall impact you want to make on the planet. Sometimes this sounds like too high level, too wishy-washy, too Martin Luther King style to some people. I want to make a positive impact on the community. But that is true for some people, right? So it could be your personal why. Why do you do what you do, right? I'm trying to eliminate homelessness from Canada. That is why I do what I do. For example, for somebody, I'm trying to create beautiful design. So what is it that you do? So this could be your personal, or it could be your professional. And yes, there is an overlap in between the two. What is a professional why? Why should somebody hire you? So just like, what's your name, sir? Kevin. So if I want Kevin to invest in a certain project that costs $500,000, Kevin is going to ask me, why should we invest in that project? Is that right? And then I'll say, Kevin, we'll be able to improve this, we'll be able to improve this, we'll be able to decrease this, and we'll be able to decrease this. And then Kevin would decide whether or not he wants to invest in that project. Yes, Kevin? Similarly, there is a why for you. Why should people invest in you? What do? I help projects deliver results faster if you're a project manager, right? What is the why that you offer to the employer that you work with? So that is the second option you got for the why. And then your skills, strengths, right? Your unique selling proposition. So USP is unique selling proposition. What differentiates you from everybody else in your league? Not from me, not from some random person, from people who are also doing the same thing as you, right? That's called unique selling proposition. Soft skills are things like communication, leadership. So these are soft skills. Hard skills are technical skills. For example, programming, data analytics, right? So spend a couple minutes, and then I'll coach one of you live. So who wants to volunteer to be coached live on this? Your name again, sir? Ashish. You can stay seated. So what I'm going to ask you, and we're going to go fast, right? You don't have to overthink it, and there's no point being modest, because we're going to ask you for all your strengths and skills and all those things, right? What's your job title?
So I'm an economist.
Economist? With what company?
So I'm an MBA. I just finished the contract. So I was previously working for a private equity firm.
Private equity firm. Okay, good. So why do you work in the economy space?
Because the learning curve never settles.
Okay.
Private equity.
Okay.
I always deal with different business models and learn about them.
So challenges. What else?
It makes me look at different models and define their feasibility. It helps me find techniques to help them grow.
Okay. Why do you like that?
Because I like to develop things.
You want to develop things? So what do you develop for them?
Business plan, exit plan for our company.
Exit plan. Okay. What else?
Growth in business, revenue.
Okay.
Find techniques for that.
Okay. What else what are the other benefits that your employer can get when they hire you? Or what are some of the results that you've produced for your
Probably
current
a
employer?
clarity of view on how, like a clarity of view of the company or the economy or the industry as a whole, so that they can make a informed decision.
Okay. So better decisions. Okay. What else? What are the other results that you produced? Did you improve something, decrease something?
I made strategies to improve the revenue streams.
Okay. Did they improve?
They're yet to come.
Okay. So I'm still struggling to find what is the core of what you do every day. Are you working on projects to inform decisions on what to work on?
So I work on different business models,
Mhm.
understand their resource dependency, the stress tests.
Well, that's the specific of what you do, right? But what are they using all of that stress test and all that resource dependency for? So that they can?
To find an alternative so that they don't depend on one thing which can hamper their business in future.
Got it. So you're helping inform strategy, right? Good. So let's get into your skills. So what are your soft skills that people compliment you on, that you think you're good in, and what are the hard skills?
Ability to perform under stress.
Okay.
Being punctual.
Under stress, okay. Punctual. What else?
Approachable.
Okay. Anything around communication, leadership, conflict management?
Conflict resolution.
What about the hard skills?
Hard skills in the sense of degrees and diplomas.
No, not degrees and diplomas. Like, what are the specific technical skills? For example, analytics, economic analysis.
Economic analysis, financial analysis, auditing.
Okay. Auditing. Anything else?
That's it. Business
That's it.
management. Business acumen.
Okay, good. So this is what you want to do first. And how long did it take? 5 minutes, right? Or 3-4 minutes. So you want to first create your inventory. Why do you do what you do? What are the benefits that your employer can receive by hiring you? What are your strengths, right? And it's always a work in process. It's never a static brand message. So what this helps you create is, and we're going to create it for him, this helps you create is what we call your brand message. And this is a message you want to communicate out on an ongoing basis so that people start to think about you and feel about you differently. So how would an average economist introduce himself? So they're going through the hallway and they meet somebody and they're like, oh, so what do you do? What are you working on? They're like, oh, I'm working on this team as an economist, and I'm working on 2 projects. Oh, okay, you're an economist. How did you end up here? I went to school in this university, and then I got this job, and I've been here for 6 years. Is this not a typical conversation that you might have? Now, what is that? How does that person think about you? Like a regular dude, right? You're an average guy, average economist, and that doesn't differentiate you from anybody else. So what is a personal branding informed way of communicating your value, what you do, so that you can over time build your powerful personal brand, which then eventually opens up the right opportunities, gets people to think about you, helps you build credibility and authority in the marketplace. So what is the other way of communicating it? It's aligned with the brand message template. Somebody asks, Ashish, what do you do for work? And Ashish says, I'm an economist in this private equity firm, but the core of everything that I've done in my business so far is to help businesses build the right strategy so that they can reduce their dependency on certain resources and make the right decisions which would eventually help grow the business. If this is what Ashish says now, that person goes, oh, that sounds pretty cool, but how did you end up here? How did you do it? He says, yeah, I've went to school, but essentially it's because of my robust understanding of economic analysis, financial analysis, and auditing. And I have a lot of training in conflict management and working under stress that has allowed me to produce some powerful results for people that I've worked with. Now, how do you think about Ashish? Completely differently, right? Obviously, this was staged, and he would do it the way he does in his conversations and in his own style, right? But do you see, if he does introduce himself and talk about himself and what he does in presentations and other conversations and in coffee meetings and in meetings over beer, over time, he would build a very powerful brand for himself. Yes or no?
Yes.
Right? That can completely transform people's perception about Ashish. And as a result, he'd be more in demand, he'd have the right authority, the right opportunities would open up, and he'll completely transform his career. So it's powerful. How do you build your brand over time? Live your brand, communicate your brand, live in alignment with your brand, right? If people find out that everything that he says, financial analysis, he doesn't know anything about financial analysis. If that happens, then he's going to dilute his brand forever, right? So you have to live in alignment with your brand, and you have to speak the truth. You can communicate in presentations. Presentations are very powerful, right? Because you influence multiple people at the same time. So you might start a presentation and he says, we're going to talk about this project, but before that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Ashish, and I work for this. I'm working here for the last 2 years, and before that I was there. But the core of everything that I've done in my career so far is helping businesses build the right strategy, everything that I just said before, right? You see that? You see how powerfully that can work? So how do you lead meetings effectively? Obviously, you lead meetings effectively with the right communication. What is the right communication? Setting the right expectation, communicating in bullet points what is the goal of the meeting. What is the why for the meeting? Then you get into the what on the meeting, and if there is a how that is applicable, that is what you get into. The goal of good meetings is to have everybody clear. One of my mentors said something to me which I've never forgotten, and that is so highly applicable to leading powerful meetings, and it is, a confused mind says no, and a clear mind says go. So if people are not in alignment with what you're trying to communicate, if you're not communicating articulately, then there's confusion. And as a result, people are not bought into your ideas, into your meetings, because they're not clear on what you're talking about, right? And the last one is, how do you build confidence? So building confidence is obviously a huge field of study, right? But one of the researchers has found, now always human beings were programmed to think that confidence works a certain way. When you're feeling good, you act confidently. For example, if you won a soccer match, you're going to have your body show up differently. You're going to feel confident for the rest of the day, maybe for the rest of the week, maybe for the rest of the month, right? Yes or no? But what research has found is that the opposite is also true. When you use your body a certain way, you improve your confidence. There was a TED Talk by Amy Cudley. Have you heard of that? Which says that you need to use what we call power poses. What are power poses? Power positions in your body that enhance your confidence. So some of those power poses are this, that, and research has found that when you take that power pose, keep that power pose for 2 minutes only, it decreases your stress levels, enhances your confidence, increases your belief level in what you feel by up to 80%. Increases your testosterone level, which is the confidence hormone, just by holding better body positions, using your body more effectively. Make sense? So when you're walking into a critical situation, in a tough meeting, take the time to enhance your confidence, because that's how you would be able to think effectively, communicate well, and build powerful relationships. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our initial expectations and see if we scratched everything out. Tips to improve communication. Did you get some of those? Yeah. Can I scratch it? Yeah. Fluency in speaking, how to be crisp. Did you get some ideas for that? Yeah. Rochelle? That was you, right? How to articulate your thoughts better. Do you get some ideas for that, Chetan and Ashish? How to build influence. How to influence other people. Do you get some ideas for that? How to be more confident. Got some ideas on that? How to lead meetings effectively. Yes? And finally, how to build trust. You get some ideas for that? Great. Does that make this workshop a success? Yes. To wrap this workshop up, in the last 3 minutes, what I'm going to share with you is one of my favorite lessons that I received from my grandmom. To share this lesson with you, I need to take you back to a time in my life. And this was the time when I moved to Vancouver and to Canada for the first time. And Vancouver welcomed me with rain. So here I was in this beautiful city of 600,000 people without a single friend. I didn't know anybody in Vancouver. Not only in Vancouver, I didn't know anybody in this entire country. It sounds like I'm exaggerating because there's Brampton and there's Surrey, and I got to know some people there at least, right? But it's the truth. I didn't know a single person in this entire country. And I moved here to pursue master's at UBC. And I started going to school, and in the June of 2013, so about a year into Canada, I had to look for an internship, which was a part of my master's program. At that time, I had to go through 500 plus job applications to find an internship in a factory in Delta. Now, Delta is about 2 hours from Vancouver, not by car, but from where I used to live in UBC. I had to take 2 buses and a train one way, 2 buses and a train back, 2 hours each way in transit. Life was good. It wasn't good. But I was having a difficult time, right? And some of you might be immigrants, or your parents might be immigrants, so you know what I'm talking about. I was trying to fit into the society. I was trying to, people said you had an accent. I had no idea I had an accent. In India, everybody has an Indian accent, right? Who knew? I was feeling like I was beaten up. But anyhow, things moved on. December of 2013, I was ready to graduate. And I was completing my reports, preparing for exams, working hard. I was busy, I was tired, I was frustrated, but I was pumped up. Ask me, sir, why were you pumped up?
Why were you pumped up?
Let's do it again. Ask me, sir, why were you pumped up?
Why were you pumped up?
Thank you. I was pumped up because as soon as I finished my MBA, I was going to go back to India to see my family. And guess what? I did go back to India to see my family. And that was the time I had this conversation with my grandmom. And she was asking me, how's life in Canada? Would you be able to do what you wanted to do? Did you get a job? Will you get a job? And you see, my experience in Canada up to that point was difficult, right? So that's what I said. I said, Grandma, I think it's going to be difficult. Maybe I should come back to India. And India had a decent life. I had a car. I was living with a family. I had a good job. Here I was trying to fit in and struggling for no reason. That's what I thought, right? But she said something to me which I have never forgotten. Something that transformed my life. And it can potentially transform yours starting today. She said, son, I know what you want to do is difficult. But everything new is difficult at first. You're in a new country, amongst new people, in a new culture. It's got to be difficult. But that doesn't mean it'll stay difficult. If you stick to it long enough, it will get easy. If you stick, it will click. Now, she said this in Hindi. I added my own rhyme to it. But isn't that true? Being able to stick through those hard times allowed me to create the options that I have today. Allowed me to do what I do today. Now, I'm not a superstar. I'm not making millions. But I'm doing what I love. And isn't that what matters? Isn't it? But that could not have happened without my grandmom's message. I would have given up. So today when you go back home, you go to work tomorrow, you might try some of these things that we covered. You might try the bullet point speaking, you might try the yes programming, you might try the fear on message based on fear, and you might try body language, you might try a number of different things. And I know it is going to be difficult. Just like my grandmom said, everything new is difficult at first, but that doesn't mean it'll stay difficult. If you stick to it long enough, if you stick to making it work, if you stick to believing in the fact that if this has worked for so many other people, it's going to work for you as well, it will get easy. If you stick, it will what? Thanks, everybody. It's been an honor for me.